Let's hear it for revolutions, because they bring change. They move the human race forward. Revolutions happen when a group of people see an empty space that needs filling, a wrong that needs righting, and a chance to rewrite the future. Well, there's a revolution happening right now, today. It's the fourth industrial revolution. And it's changing everything. Technology is changing. Everything and everyone is connected all the time, everywhere. Business is changing. It's becoming a platform for change, where companies do well by doing good. Work is changing, with new skills, new demands, and new opportunities for all. And with all that change, people are changing, getting empowered, inspiring others, and blazing new trails. Salesforce is for trailblazers. People who look right past the status quo, see what ought to be, and then build it. For 20 years, Salesforce is focused on one simple, most important thing: customer success, helping every company connect with their customers in a whole new way. Trailblazers know for each of us to succeed, we all have to succeed together. Learn the skills of the future together and create a better world together. And together, we'll define this revolution and discover the trailblazer in all of us. This is why we come together each year, and I hope you're ready, because great times are coming. Welcome to Dreamforce.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chairman and Co-CEO, Salesforce, Marc Benioff.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing? Are you enjoying Dreamforce? All right. Did you enjoy Metallica last night? How many of you have been to Dreamforce before? Raise your hand. All right, very good. All right, well, welcome. We're going to have a conversation with a really great CEO who I've known for, I think, almost a decade. So please welcome Drew Houston. Drew, come on out. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you.
Drew, we've known each other a long time, and usually I have to ask you when your IPO is, but it's already happened, so congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, you're one of the fastest growing companies in San Francisco. You just rented this amazing new facility down in Mission Bay. What's it like being an entrepreneur in our city?
Well, it's been a great year, and as you mentioned, we went public in March, and we got a couple quarters under our belt as a public company, and so it's really great being an entrepreneur in San Francisco. I think things like Dreamforce are a testament and highlight all the amazing things that are happening in our industry, and so we see a ton of opportunity in front of us.
Now, I know you have an incredibly innovative company. You've done a lot of amazing things in terms of new products that you've built, and you've really changed our industry. You've had a huge vision on how the technology has shifted and changed, but also you've really adopted a very compelling set of values inside your organization. What is the most important thing to you every day in your leadership at Dropbox?
Well, so probably about 5-6 years ago, my co-founder Arash and I, we've always really cared about our company culture, but we had never really written down what that was. And so we decided on 5 cultural principles that are really important to us. And I think some of them, there's some overlap. So the first is be worthy of trust. And I know your first value is trust as well. And we feel a serious responsibility because people are storing their most important personal information, their most important company information, and we want to be the best possible caretakers of that in every way. And we want to earn our customers' trust in general, but then things like privacy, security, all those things are critically important. And then there are a few other things. We sweat the details, aim higher, we not I. I could talk a little bit about those. But then the fifth value is, I step back and I'm like, all right, those first 4 are pretty good. They're true or they're aspirational or they're the things we want them to be, but they're very serious. And one of our illustrators had made this drawing of this smiling cupcake with stars shooting out of it for one of our onboarding flows. And I'm like, that's kind of what we want. And so I was like, what if we just make that, not the word cupcake, not delight, not don't take ourselves too seriously, just that image of that smiling cupcake. And so that's our 5th value. So those 5 things are certainly some of what's really important to us. And then we also think from our customer standpoint, and we updated our company mission last year, so we also think a lot about our customer experience and what we can be doing for them.
What kind of things are you doing to build more trust in your organization today?
Well, first is just living it within the company. And so we want all of our values to be true both of the commitments we make internally, and then we also want them to be true of the relationship we have with our customers. And so for us, it was really important to have our first value be a phrase, be worthy of trust, as opposed to just the concept of trust, because it's something you have to earn every day. And in a company like ours, or really any company, there's obviously projects, new products, and things we're working on. But we always want to highlight the important work, kind of the eternal vigilance of teams like the security team, or our policy teams, or our privacy teams, who are helping keep the company safe and keep our users' information safe. And so there's a lot of, we think a lot about how do we highlight that work where kind of no news is good news, right? If you're a security team, or you're on the infrastructure team and you're keeping the service available. So we think a lot culturally about how do we elevate that work in addition to the things that make the headlines.
How about trust with your community? Is there things that you're doing to project that in order to engage at that level?
Yeah, so this has been an evolution for us too. So we launched the Dropbox Foundation this year. And it's something that we're really excited about. And so we're early stages on this, and we've learned a lot from your example, and I think you've been incredible in terms of how you've woven philanthropy and these important causes into the work of the company. And we think that companies can be a great vehicle for making communities better and for advancing a lot of these important causes. But the foundation is an example of something where we're still honing exactly the focus, but basically around human rights and equal opportunity. And so we have a number of grantees close to close to many of our offices around San Francisco. We have one of our grantees is Larkin Street, who you've all heard about, and they do
one of our two very top homeless services organizations, with Hamilton families.
Yep, and Hamilton's great too. But so Larkin Street's an example of a grantee, and we both support them financially, but then we also allow our employees to have volunteer time off and to engage in person with whether it's one of our grantees or any organization in the community.
When you look at Silicon Valley and San Francisco, you've been here now for about a decade. When did you get here?
2007.
I remember you got on a bus. When did you get on that bus?
I moved to...
What happened exactly? You were at MIT, you kind of figured out this whole idea of Dropbox, and then you got on a bus and you decided to come to San Francisco.
Well, that would have been a long bus ride to San Francisco. But no, I was... so 2006, the way Dropbox got started was I was on the Chinatown bus from Boston to New York visiting my friends. And the whole genesis for Dropbox was I had all this work to do that I thought I was going to get done on the bus, and then I forgot my thumb drive. And this was like before the iPhone, this is before Wi-Fi, there's no Wi-Fi on the Chinatown bus. And so if you like don't have stuff to do, like you really don't have stuff to do, because like I forgot my thumb drive, so not only am I not going to get any work done, but I was like on my laptop, I'm like, do I have any Family Guy episodes I haven't seen? And I didn't, and so I'm just like sitting there being like, oh my God, I never want to have this problem again. And so I started writing some Python code, I had no idea this would become a company or anything. I was just like, I have one customer in mind, myself, I just never want to have this problem again. But that was really the seed of Dropbox, and actually those first lines of code were kind of what blossomed into everything else, even though I had no idea at the time. And then pretty soon after that, I met my co-founder, who we studied computer science together at MIT, and we made the pilgrimage to California, and before our boxes were unpacked, we found ourselves getting funded by a venture capital firm. So it was a pretty wild ride, but that was all in 2007.
So now you're out here. You've been out here for more than a decade. Okay. And you've seen Silicon Valley change a lot in the last 10 years. And you have very close relationships with a lot of the major founders of different companies and so forth. But you know, and you've seen that, you know, a lot of them are wrestling with this value of trust because the nature of our industry has changed a lot in the last decade. And, you know, we've seen, you know, we talked about this with Dara also, you know, customers walking out. I mean, that's very much why he all of a sudden became the new CEO of Uber. We've seen employees walk out of certain companies. We won't go through which companies and what's going on. We've seen executives walk out of different companies. And as this is happening, those different stakeholders are all saying, well, it's all about trust. Why do you think certain CEOs are having trouble shifting into this value and doubling down in this area?
Well, I think it's because it's easy to take it for granted, or there's so many other forces when, you know, you're looking at your business's performance, or you look at your investors are always calling for more growth and more profitability, and your customers are calling for the product to be better. And culture or trust are an example of one of those things where it's kind of like oxygen. You only notice it if it's missing. And fortunately, we had some really good advisors early on that helped instill a lot, or helped kind of seed a lot of these values. And then part of it was the nature of our business was that, you know, we're a subscription service, right? We only survive if we do a great job for our customers. And so I think that helped us, or that orientation, and, you know, and the fact that all of our stuff was in Dropbox, and, you know, everybody's incentives were aligned. But I think we struggled as to this day, we think about, like, all right, well, yes, here's all the things we want to build, and here's all the ways we want to grow the business, but there's so many people in this company that do really important work behind the scenes that makes everything else possible. And so we've always thought about how do we make sure that foundational work and those cultural principles around trust, and that idea that it requires this eternal vigilance and we're never done. Those are a lot of the things that we think about as we design our culture.
So it's a dance between trust and growth, or trust and success.
Yeah.
And then if all of a sudden growth and success become more important than trust, then all of a sudden you get this cascading set of events in your organization. Is that what happens?
Yeah. Well, once you lose trust, it's really hard to get it back, right? And they say, the Warren Buffett quote, right? Your reputation can take, you know, decades to build and seconds to destroy. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but and so that's why it's really hard, because you only notice it if it's missing.
So tell me, what is it, or what is your prescription for CEOs in Silicon Valley to kind of heal this issue? How will they be able to say, no, we are focused on the trust that we have with our customers, their privacy, the integrity we have. We're going to put this above growth. Mm-hmm. Well, what is the prescription for them?
Well, I think
I'm sure they must be calling you and asking you what to do.
Well, what has worked for us is, first, often when you're starting a company, if you're a founder in the first few years, you kind of have a general sense of what your culture is, and it just sort of happens, right? It's a function of the people that the early team that you hire. But then as the company gets bigger and the operations become more complicated, you get pulled in a lot of different directions. So step one for us was just have that conversation. Like, what's most important to you? Who do you want to be as a company? What kind of leaders do you want to be? And I don't think it's really a culture unless it's written down, because that's the only way you can scale it. And so then once you've written it down, you can share those principles publicly, or certainly within your company, with your customers. And so that helps then you don't have to, one of the things that stresses you out as a founder is you're like, God, you know, I can only be in one room at a time, but of every decision that's being made, you know, for every decision I'm making, there are thousands of decisions being made where my co-founder and I aren't in the room. And so then you have to have mechanisms to help people make those trade-offs. And so all companies, of course, are going to have product teams that are building the next product, but then making sure to fund and elevate your finance teams, legal teams, the people that are doing the foundational work, and then finding ways to recognize those people and recognize all the effort that they have. And so when we talk about the success of the business, we certainly talk about how the products we're building and all the other areas, but we also talk about the foundation. We always have foundational goals. And we make sure that when we're at all hands presentations or we're talking about someone's performance review, that at all hands we talk about, today we had our security team get up and explain, hey, here's the work we're doing, and here's some of the amazing people we have, and next month is October, is Trustober. I mean, maybe not the most clever name, but we just like, hey, like 1 out of 12 months a year, we're gonna really think about, this is just gonna be top of mind for everyone. So I don't think it's one thing. I think you have to thread it through the entire operating system of your company. And then whenever you have problems or near misses, you have to have a culture of reflection about it and be like, okay, well, problems are going to happen, but how do we make sure we don't have that specific problem again?
Do you think these CEOs are surprised that they're struggling with this in their companies as they're scaling up? Do you think it's a wake-up call for them, or do you think that they're going to just continue to cruise along with their existing value system until it's a more significant bump in the road?
Well, I think I think first just raising awareness that the importance of culture, and I think that now, yeah, there are a bunch of high-profile examples of like what happens if your culture gets broken, and it's one of those things where if you have a broken culture, then nobody really cares how well your business is performing, and nobody really cares how great your products are. And so I think people are learning by that example, but I think also helping founders and leaders understand how to actually implement that. Because in some cases, at least I want to believe that in a lot of these cases, it wasn't on purpose. That nobody sets out to design a broken culture, right? And so something gets away from you, and usually it's because your customers will be, or your problems internally will be screaming, your customers will be demanding new things from you, your investors will be demanding things from you, but often the foundational things are not screaming unless they are totally broken, and at that point it's often too late to fix it.
One of my questions about that we have had so many conversations now over a decade, and dozens and dozens and dozens of conversations, but we just had the same conversation backstage again about equality. And we know that in the technology industry, we have an imperative more than at any other time that we're trying to bring in and have greater levels of gender equality and greater levels of racial equality, more diversity, more inclusion. What is the struggle with the technology industry? Why is it that we're having a hard time bringing everybody in that we can become a full rainbow ourselves? What is it going to take?
Well, I think it's a struggle because, as we've all seen, we're starting from a pretty bad place, right? And so you look at the representation in tech, and it does not reflect the representation in the overall community. And for that, so there needs to be real effort to get that to change. And so we have, I think what you've been doing is a great example of that, and certainly within our company, this is something that we really care about, and my co-founder Arash and I have always wanted, where we start, we've always wanted Dropbox to be the best possible place to work for everyone. And I think this is another thing where you have to thread it. This issue might not be screaming as loudly as some of the other things you do when you're running a business. And so you have to think about, okay, well, how do I translate our intentions and desire, and aspirations, which are all good, into systems and actually turn it into progress. And so, and I think you have to operationalize it like anything else. You have to have systems for equality, the same you have systems for governing revenue. And so it's really, and a lot of it's just nuts and bolts about, all right, how do we make sure we're casting a wide net for talent? And it's not enough to just recruit. You have to build an environment, and you have to build a culture where people want to stay. And so I think it's something the tech industry is still broadly figuring out. No question, still a long way to go, but I think it's just that sustained effort and just building it into the fabric of the company and of the industry to get it to a better place.
Well, you're a millennial CEO, and I'm not a millennial CEO. So when you look at being a millennial CEO and you look at others and your peers who are, CEOs who are in their 30s or even in their 20s, what do you think is going to differentiate you and your generation of CEO? How do you think that you'll be different than the technology CEOs that have come in the decades before you?
Well, I think so. I'm on like the millennial fringe. I was born and I'm 35, so I'm sort of like right on the cutoff of millennial. But and I think it's dangerous to generalize about a generation. But one thing that's certainly more top of mind these days is people will need more than just a paycheck from their job, right? And there's more and more demand for an employee who they want to be part of something bigger than just a company, and these causes are really important, and they want to feel like the work that they're doing has a purpose, both for your customer and how you're making life better at scale, but then also how your company is contributing to and integrating with the community or with a lot of these causes. And so I'm hopeful that there's a level of awareness now around you have more stakeholders than just your shareholders, more stakeholders than just your customers. I think businesses are a lot more attuned to their needs of their employees for fulfillment. Our company mission, we updated it to, we want to design a more enlightened way of working and have a more holistic and humanistic view of how business should be done.
I saw you mention your mid-20s, you're in your mid-30s. When we revisit with you, and I think you were here 5 years ago at Dreamforce as well, you spoke. I can't remember when your first Dreamforce was, but maybe it was almost a decade ago. 10 years from now, when you're 45, what will you want to have accomplished? What will people are always overestimating what you can do in a year, underestimating what you can do in a decade. You've certainly proved that over the last decade. Over the next decade, what is it that you want to achieve in your personal vision and values now that you have this incredible public company, incredible wealth and capability, power in the city? What are you going to do with it?
Well, it's really exciting. I think one of the best parts about being an entrepreneur at this time is, and now having the scale we do, is we're painting on a much bigger canvas. And so we can take on bigger and bigger challenges. And so maybe 10 years ago, my frustration was carrying around a thumb drive. And my co-founder and I started thinking like, well, life would be a lot better if our important information lived in the cloud. And now, 11 years later, that's mostly problem solved, and a lot of companies have had a hand in that. But a few years ago, I was thinking like, as Dropbox was becoming more successful and the company was getting bigger, I'm like, my job kind of sucks. Like,
Have you thought about a co-CEO?
I'm like, my God, I'm going from like emails to fire to meeting to email to fire, and I'm like, this treadmill just keeps going faster, and I'm like, I'm way busier, but I'm not more productive, and I can't think of the last time I did anything like really creative, and I'm like, I'm the CEO. I can't really blame anyone because I'm like, I'm the CEO, so I'm like, what's up with this? And this is a little bit where the enlightened way of working concept came from, because I'm like, I feel like our industry has been really good at finding ways to make this treadmill go faster, right? Because you like wake up, try to work out, go to work, come home. And work has kind of expanded into every moment of our waking lives. And I think a lot of that is because of the technology. Now, I think you said it in your keynote, technology is neither good nor bad, but it can have those impacts. And so I was like, this is crazy. Like, we're, in our company and in our sector and in society and overall, like, we are hiring people for their minds and then not giving them any space to think. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because, we know how a physical environment can make us happier or more productive or not. The same thing is true of our virtual environments. Right? And in many ways, they're a lot more important because we may be going to an office in the morning, but more and more we're working out of a screen. And you think about that in an environment, and you look at that virtual environment, and it's just a mess. And I remember when I first visited my dad at work when I was a little kid, and I'd go in his office, and he had a computer, and he had Office, and he had email. And I think about today, I'm like, well, we have all this new stuff, but we're still using Office and email. That's kind of crazy. But then we have like these sedimentary layers of new technologies, and it's just
I'm not using mayhem. Office anymore, actually.
And so I was just like, my dad might have gotten 5 emails a day. I get 500, right? And I'm like, this doesn't, and this affects all of us. Like, if Einstein were alive, not your Einstein.
He's right to your right.
Yeah, not your Einstein, the other guy. What would we do? Right, Einstein? Like he'd wake up in the morning, he'd spend his first couple hours cleaning out his inbox, like archiving like Groupons and LinkedIn notifications. Then he'd get down to work and he'd, just as he's like starting to write out the formula, his phone would buzz with like a Trump tweet or something, and and then we wouldn't understand relativity. And so it's crazy, yeah, because so we really need a much more thoughtfully designed and calmer and focused work environment. And then what I realized a few years ago is like, wait, Dropbox. Have you met the monastics yet, by the way, here? You're really setting up a good presentation for them. Yeah, we should talk, guys. But we realized, like, okay, no one is really designing that environment because there's a lot of different companies making all these different tools and invented in different decades. The companies are all fighting. And no one is really tying all this together. And in the research, like neuroscience, psychology, like we know what people need to be fulfilled and be productive, right? And it's when you have all the information you need. It's when you're able to focus. You're in some kind of flow state. You're not getting interrupted. And it's as if our environment is just designed for the opposite of that, right? Like our phones are blinking at us hundreds of times a day. And so what we want to do at Dropbox is we realized that a lot of people were going to work in Dropbox. And maybe they started using Dropbox at home to share photos or something, but then they brought it into work. And so we have 500 million registered users around the world. They've brought us into millions of companies. And more, Dropbox is not really a place for storage. It's this living workspace where people come together and their ideas come to life. And so we see a huge opportunity to tie together all these different ecosystems and all these different tools you're using and make them work better together. And then make the tools smarter, so through machine learning, machine intelligence. Imagine if you had kind of an AI co-pilot that was helping you figure out, like, yeah, there's a million things you could be paying attention to right now, but these are the most important. And wouldn't it be great if the notifications kind of turned off because you had to focus on something? And so how do we get to a place where you open up your screen and only the important stuff shows up? How do we help? How can we help have a silicon brain help make the most of our human brain? So those are a lot of the things that we think about when it comes to the next 10 years. And so I'm hopeful that 10 years from now, we'll have lower blood pressure, we'll be a lot happier, a lot more fulfilled. We'll look back on 2018 and be like, what the hell were we doing?
We just had Mayor Breed on the stage, and we had a deep conversation, and we also touched the third rail of San Francisco, which is homelessness, which is our #1 issue in the city. We're going through a serious homeless crisis. Before I came out here, I noticed some people on social media were upset because I had spoken to a homeless individual who had said to me, San Francisco is almost like the Four Seasons of homelessness in terms of they're coming here, there's so many services. Whenever we talk about this, it's a supercharged issue, but everybody does want the best for the homeless. You helped us participate in raising $37 million for Hamilton Family Center to get every homeless family off the streets in San Francisco. We're focused on what are the programs that are going to happen to directly address individual homelessness, all aspects of homelessness, whether it's homeless families or people who are intentionally homeless or homeless by circumstance or the mentally ill or people who are have a drug addiction. So many different types of people make up our homeless issue. You can see it when we just walk right outside the door here. It's super important to everyone in our city, especially native San Franciscans like myself and the mayor and others, and people that we welcome, people to San Francisco like yourself. When you walk around San Francisco, and I know that you do, and you live almost right across the street, tell me, what is it that you want to see San Francisco do? What do you want to see Dropbox do? What is your prescription for homelessness in our city? What kind of things can we all do to improve the city?
Well, I mean, the first thing you think is this is heartbreaking, and this, like, how can this be the case in one of the most affluent cities in the world, that there's such a divide. And I don't know if any single person has all the answers. I think what it's going to take is, this is another example of a really systemic problem, and it's going to take systemic fixes. And so I think it's going to be, there's certainly a number of things that the government and the city that can do, and then there's, say that again? And absolutely, and then businesses. There's a lot of ways for businesses to contribute financially to get their team engaged, and we've taken our first steps in that direction with the Dropbox Foundation, and then supporting a lot of the folks that are already doing great work in this area. And Hamilton Families is a great example. Larkin Street's another great example. And then I think it's also going to need to be, you need to get everybody from the different communities around San Francisco. I don't think it's just the city issue. And there's a lot of, when you think about, well, if you look, in a company, you often think about, okay, if there's a problem, it helps to analyze the root cause or ask why 5 times. That was something the folks at Toyota and others. So how do you build in quality? You have to analyze what are these root causes and just keep asking why, and then you get to other sets of problems that need to be fixed. It's like, well, why are people homeless if they can't keep good work, or if there's a substance use problem? So it's really a network of causes, and I think it's going to need to have a network of solutions. And I think the challenge will be, how do we get everybody together and to collaborate on them?
One of the related issues is public education. Obviously, great companies like Dropbox and Salesforce, we need more and more amazing people. We're both looking for talent. Hopefully, you won't take too many of our people, and we won't take, and we're not going to, get into some huge crazy competition. But it's a challenge to hire in our city, and to find great people and to bring them in. And our public schools are a key source of that talent, especially getting our K through 12 schools really functioning well. When you look at the public school systems, we have some, we're really investing a lot in San Francisco and Oakland public school systems specifically, and you've seen it on the East Coast. What do you think we need to do to improve public education?
That's a good question. I went to a public school on the East Coast, and I was fortunate enough that it was a good school. I don't claim to be a subject matter expert on public schools, but I imagine that I think it's a systemic challenge, and it's going to need a systemic solution. And a lot of the themes of how do you address a really complex issue like homelessness, I think also carry over to the schools. And I think that I think businesses can also help there. That's another place where people can engage in the community, and I think there's public schools, but then there's also other forms of education and other ways you can help people become ready for the workforce. And so I think you both have to, yes, address the public school system, but then I think there's also other things that you can do to help create the workforce that we need, and create an environment where you can bring everybody in. And I think I love your Trailblazers program. That's something that's very concrete that people can do to on their own volition. They can go and learn and get the skills they need to get, whether it's a new job or a raise or promotion. I love the stat that it sounded like a quarter of people were reported that having some kind of advancement in their career as a result. And so I think in addition to helping directly with that cause, businesses can run experiments like that, right? And set an example for what the city or to have the city or have government or have the school system think a little bit more expansively about, all right, in the 21st century, we have some new building blocks that we can use to address this problem. And so businesses can run a lot of experiments that often cities or governments can't. So, but I think it's going to be a partnership.
Another thing that's really got accelerated in the last decade that we've known each other is, our continued focus on the environment, sustainability, really looking at what's going on, the global climate crisis. We had Al Gore speak this morning. What kind of things can we do together, decarbonizing our companies, decarbonizing our conferences, but what are the kind of things that you want to see our peers and others do in the areas of environmental access, environmental sustainability, moving us towards a more sustainable industry?
Yeah, so I think there are things that are within any company's control, and so certainly we operate a lot of data, or we lease data center space, but we, as you imagine, a company like Dropbox, we got a lot of servers, and so I think having greener infrastructure on that front is a clear opportunity. We're moving into a new office next year, and fortunately the technology is advancing pretty quickly, and I think in terms of making buildings that are inherently more sustainable and more efficient. And so those are a few examples, but I think then you look at, well, these environmental challenges are going to require some serious advancements, and so I think our venture capital community and funding startups and empowering people with these big ideas is another thing we can do. And I feel like technology is, relying on the current legislative environment doesn't seem super promising. So, hopefully we'll be able to invent our way at least out of part of this. And there's some pretty cool stuff happening out there. And we both know Boyan and the Ocean Cleanup Project. Here's a kid who started getting this in his teens, and he just had this idea for like, how do we clean up all the plastic in the ocean? He has this contraption that just launched that's going to go out into the great, that Texas-sized patch in the Pacific and start to try to make this better. And I think bringing that entrepreneurial spirit, and I know you're a big supporter of that, but I think bringing that entrepreneurial spirit and that mindset to a lot of these big problems, and I'm sure Boyan was bombarded with 200 reasons why this thing wasn't going to work, but he powered through and did it anyway, and he's making a lot more progress than anyone who's criticizing him. And so I think bringing that mindset and that courage and that resilience to some of these problems, and not being afraid to run experiments, I think a lot of the techniques that you use to grow these tech companies can be applied to a lot of our challenges.
If you would go back and give yourself advice now, 11 years ago, when you're starting your company and you're on your way out here and creating your culture and creating your company, and who would have thought that you'd have, more than $1 billion in revenue, and you'd gone public and all these things. If you turn the Wayback machine back to 2006, 2007, what advice would you have given yourself? What's the one thing you wish you had known then that you do know now?
Well, I think the main thing is that no one's born a CEO. And so, like, no one comes out of the womb with like an Armani suit on and great hair, and that's it's something that is learned, not innate. And certainly everyone has talents that they can bring to the job, or some things will be easier or harder. But the key for me has really been keeping my personal growth curve ahead of the company's growth curve. Because fortunately, you don't wake up one day and the next with 2 employees and the next day with 2,000. It all happens over time. And if you have that kind of growth mindset, you realize that anything is trainable. And I found that a lot of things that would have been terrifying to me, like leading a big team or even being in front of a bunch of people like this, would have been super intimidating when I was just getting started. And yeah, you might not make a lot of progress in 5 weeks on one of those skills like leadership or management or any of the things you have to do to scale a company. But over 5 years, you can make a lot of progress. And so I think people kind of sell themselves short when pretty much every skill that I've found that you need to run a company, you may not be the best in the world at it, but you can certainly make a lot of progress in training yourself. And so that would have given me a lot of comfort to know that I don't have to be perfect, and that if you're thoughtful about training yourself, you can make a lot of progress.
When I first met you, every single time I met you, every time I had lunch with you or dinner with you or spent time with you, you always had a Pearl Jam shirt on. And I was surprised backstage that you didn't have a Pearl Jam shirt on anymore. But you're going to a Pearl Jam concert, or you're going to go see Eddie Vedder. You spent a lot of time with Pearl Jam. I think they even invested in the company at some point. Yes. Right? And you loved Eddie Vedder, and you spent time with Lars Ulrich and many musicians, and you love music. I think you have a soundstage in your house. You love playing music. You're great at the guitar. You're an incredible musician. I think you even play part of a band sometimes. So, what, am I letting a secret out of the bag? No, everybody knows.
Well,
you're a lover of the industry. The whole spirit of music is part of who you are. And so tell me, what have you learned from those musicians and from music that you bring into your work?
Well, so I have a 90s rock cover band called Angry Flannel. We started back about 10 years ago. Maybe
Are you playing on the Dreamforce
I was going to say, we're available for Dreamforce, weddings, bar mitzvahs. We all met on Craigslist back in Boston, and we're still together. They actually surprised me at the IPO, and we, at the reception on that Friday, they threw me my guitar, and they're like, all right, and then we played a show. So what I love about it is, or what really, I mean, I love music for its own sake, but I think there's a lot that you can learn about, or I just love the creative process in general. And so how do you bring together all these different people? How do you sustain excellence and creativity over, in the case of some of those bands, like many decades? Everybody's got these strong personalities. How do you maintain those relationships? So I think there's a lot that that tech or that business can learn from the creative arts.
One of the things you've done in your home soundstage is people come over, you make them karaoke. I've seen everybody karaoke there. I think I even saw Barack Obama karaoke on your soundstage, mostly because you make all these people karaoke, and they can't leave your house without karaokeing and singing, and you are playing live guitar along with the whole thing. What have you learned from all these people forcing them into this karaoke nightmare?
I think everyone could use a little more karaoke in their life.
Very good. All right, well, please thank Drew Houston. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Mark.